Hello and welcome everybody. We are so thrilled you're all here. My name is Tanner Woodford. I'm founder and executive director of the Design Museum of Chicago. Our mission is to educate, inspire, and foster innovation through design. We believe design has the capacity to fundamentally improve the human condition and strive to make it accessible to everyone through free exhibitions and events like this. We're so happy you're here. A couple of rules of the room this evening. The best way to view this event is in speaker view. All participants will be muted except for the speakers. If you have any technical difficulties, please try to exit and re-enter Zoom. If it persists, know that we'll be posting a recording of this discussion after the event on Facebook and YouTube, so you can catch it there. If you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A box. We'll answer them at the end of the event. Raising products is possible due to support from the Terra Foundation for American Art. We're so grateful to the Terra Foundation. The Terra Foundation is dedicated to fostering exploration, understanding, and enjoyment of the visual arts of the United States for national and international audiences. We also want to thank the Stony Island Arts Bank, who is our original host pre-COVID for this event, and the South Shore Chamber of Commerce for all of their support and being just really fantastic advocates for raising products. There's one more conversation on this series. It's been a three-part series. Join us next Thursday, April 30th at 6 p.m. for a discussion between Paula Aguera from Borderless Studio and Obi Nozota from Orange Skin. We will also be posting a link to download a program in the Q&A box, so you should see that pop up any minute here. I now want to introduce our wonderful panelists. We have three this evening, including Norm, who's our moderator. Norman Teague is a Chicago-based designer and educator who focuses on projects and pedagogy that address the complexity of urbanism and the culture of communities. He co-founded Black House Studios with Fo Wilson, who is also here tonight. Welcome, Fo. Black House Studios is a socially focused design firm. I'm happy to have Erin Harkey here this evening. Erin is the Deputy Commissioner of Programming at the Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events for the City of Chicago. Prior to joining DCASH, she was the Senior Project Manager at the Los Angeles County Arts Commission, and before that, Associate Director of Public Art and Design at the Arts Council for Long Beach, where she managed temporary and permanent public art projects. Thanks for coming, Erin. We also have Yohance Lacour. I'm so thrilled to have Yohance here as well. After spending the bulk of a decade-long prison sentence mastering leathercraft, Yohance Lacour came home to launch an eponymous line of handcrafted sneakers and leather goods. The Chicago-based entrepreneur, artist, and activist is reimagining luxury with radical designs and one-of-a-kind pieces inspired by centuries of cultural phenomena. And I've seen several of his shoes, and they're really wonderful. We had a workshop with Norm, actually, at Experimental Station last year, and it was a real great process.
Yeah, that was dope.
So with all that, I'll hand it over to Norman, and I'm going to shut off my screen, and I'll pop back in about 6:45 to help wrap things up. Thanks, everyone.
Oh, thank you so much, Tanner. Thank you, Yohance Lacour, for joining us. Erin Harkey, really appreciate your time, your excellence in your fields. I wanted to lay a little groundwork, so I'm going to open up with just a little bit of PowerPoint that I have here. Cool. So raising products. I think I mainly want to do this just to give a little context to the way that I was inspired as a designer of color, looking for other designers of color. And these are just some of the early findings and contemporary findings that I've been motivated by. This one is a little concerning to Yohance, but also to each of us, because we all wear shoes. This brother, John Meltzeller, invented a shoe lasting machine that took the production of shoes from 70 per day to 700 pairs a day, which really changed the industry. He actually got a patent in 1883. So this piece was sort of changing for African Americans, but it's also been a motivator for me for quite some time. I don't know if we would call him a designer. I think he was more of an engineer, but I think his work is very prolific. And this one is really kind of kick-ass to me because for years I've heard this phrase, the real McCoy, but never really thought that it applied to. So back in the day when people, prior to people getting on a train, they would ask if this train was a real McCoy, meaning that does it continue to go without these multiple stops? So steam engines had to be stopped every so often to re-lubricate the engine. And so this brother, Elijah McCoy, invented the automatic engine lubricator and patented it in 1872. And so I thought for good purposes that this was a really good one to have. For some more contemporary heroes that I have in the design world, Philip Freelon, rest in peace, and David Auger, who designed uh, a memorable piece for all of us, the National Museum of African American History, which opened in 2016. But they not only did they design it, but they really took heed to make sure that a story was told as you walk through the space. It is a monument that I think we all hold close and dear to us. And we celebrate those designers. Even more contemporary and local is a good friend of mine and a hero to quite a few people is Edra Soto. And this super sexy screen house at Millennium Park is absolutely amazing. Her work is really stunning. I really enjoy the way Edra keeps in touch with a culture, but never lets loose on the work that she wants to put out to people. And so this piece I really find enjoyable because it's made of such a weighty material, but from afar it might look like a lacy object, a very lightweight in its stature. So I chose these few pieces to get us started, to reveal a few of my favorites. And I wanted to leave a little room now for our panelists to talk a little bit about their work. And I can change as you tell me to.
Hi, it's my turn?
Yeah, Erin, this is you, babe.
Okay. Well, thanks very much for inviting me to participate in this conversation. I don't consider myself a designer, but I certainly have had the good fortune to work really closely with designers, Edra Soto being one of them. We worked with her to do that project in the Millennium Park, and Norman and Fo and Tanner and the Design Museum have all are frequent collaborators with us at DK, so happy to be here. Just sort of to give everybody a little bit of like background about how I got to Chicago. I'm from Los Angeles originally, as Tanner mentioned in my bio, and sort of my educational background is in urban planning and public art administration. So I have 2 master's degrees from USC. And that work, before that I had worked in sort of different contexts at museums and performing arts organizations, but like through that sort of educational process, I think really found what my calling was, and that's really looking at how artists can work and help shape sort of the environment that we are living and working in. One of the most transformational like projects that I worked on, which has informed my process every day since, is a project that I worked on called Willowbrook Is. And it's a project that was funded by the National Endowment for the Arts. We worked with an artist whose name is Rostin Wu to sort of guide the community through a process that would help inform future community planning exercises, because there was a lot of investment being targeted into that particular community of Willowbrook, which is located between Watts and Compton in South Los Angeles. Design played a really critical role in helping to engage folks. So the type of design, sort of friendly design, graphic design that was part of that was our primary way of getting people engaged. And the product of that work was a sort of new cultural asset map that sort of tried to work with communities to think broader about the sort of definition of cultural asset within our communities. And what we ended up highlighting was really a sort of a look at sort of the creative aspirations of individuals, right? So the design senses of individuals. So their unique collections, you know, their houses, how they decorated their houses, how they decorated, you know, sort of their interiors and their cars. And so it became a really, I think, interesting way of talking about creativity and culture within one's community that has informed the way that I sort of define culture in my work going forward. You want to move to the next slide. When I moved to Chicago in 2016, I sort of took over management of our cultural programs at the Department of Cultural Affairs, which includes our visual arts program, which is led by Danny Schulman and Greg Lunsford. And one of the exhibitions that we did last year, which was part of the Terra's Art Design Chicago, was a sort of survey of African-American designers in Chicago, of which this Emmett McBain design was part of one of those sort of ephemera artworks that was part of the exhibition. And I love it because, you know, it has become, Black is Beautiful has become part of, you know, something that I knew, that I understood, and was part of our conversations and dialogue even before I came to Chicago. And so coming to Chicago and realizing that this was really the origin of that was really important. And I think one of the things that I like best about living in Chicago and now being a Chicagoan is that we have this sort of history of using design and using art, and artists being, you know, part of this sort of radical, you know, process to sort of switch the narrative and to claim that narrative in a way that I think has really shaped and can continue to inform the way that we see ourselves in the world, that in turn sees us. So next.
That's awesome.
And then I just wanted to sort of show this as well, just in terms of like my inspirations. When I was in grad school, so I was like the only Black person in the sort of art part of my program, and then one of two Black folks in the urban design and urban planning function side of my program. And one of the ways that I sort of like to think about design, right, is sort of like we often think about it in terms of, you know, things that are transactional, so things that we wear, things that we buy, but there's this sort of broader sense of design, which is sort of the design of our communities and our spaces, and there's so few of us that are in that space. And Walter Hood, who is the gentleman who helped to design this plaza at the Broad Museum, is one of my sort of heroes for that, because he is, you know, thinking and addressing issues of urbanism and is making sure that our sort of voices are at the table when we're talking about these big, you know, comprehensive, you know, planning and design processes. So I just wanted to sort of raise him as an opportunity to think about, you know, design and the impact that we can have, you know, more broadly in creating the spaces and places in which we live.
Awesome, Erin. Thank you so much. That's really great. I love Walter Hood. Um, Yohance,
What's happening?
how you doing, brother?
I'm good. I'm good, Norm. What's
Good.
up, Erin? I appreciate everything you said, especially bringing it home to Chicago. Welcome, and you're here, and that was, I love the city, so I just learned something. So I'm right. I'm Yohance, and I just kind of chose some pictures to give you an idea of what I do in terms of artwork. I work with leather. I did some time away, and I picked up leather craft while I was in prison. And I came home, and like today we're talking about product, purpose versus profit. It was mandatory that I make some sort of profit, but I knew that I wanted to work with leather. And so one thing led to another. I started working at the Chicago School of Shoemaking, started designing sneakers. And that's a pair I'm proud of because it's not a pair I offer regularly. I had a good brother who owned a restaurant up north, and he wanted to create a shoe for his restaurant. His restaurant's now closed, but I took that kind of, he had a huge Mexican graffiti art on his wall, and I took pieces of it and put it in the shoe. It's one of my favorite shoes that I've made. So I make shoes, and I make bags. I make leather goods. Like I said, I picked it up in prison. Ultimately, I would like to. I've done work with you, Norm and Tanner. We did a workshop for youngsters from Hyde Park High School, and teach them about designing sneakers. And that's the type of thing like we talk about all the time. I'd love to be able to offer this type of skill and exposure to the work to brothers and sisters coming home from prison in similar situations. Like what I was in. And so now I design leather goods. I'm creating leather visual arts. I'm networking. I've been home for a couple of years, so I'm networking, building a great network with folks like y'all. This is a piece I just did recently. It was at the Hyde Park Art Center, one of not just another pretty face exhibit. And a brother, Patrick McCoy, amazing collector, amazing dude, a genius, brilliant guy. And it was a real honor because when he's more than a collector. A collector, you think about a regular person. He's not a regular guy. His collection is like could fill a museum, a fairly large size museum. He doesn't art everywhere. It's crazy. And so to be selected, to be commissioned to do a piece for him was an honor. So I kind of stepped outside of my comfort zone and followed a vision I had for a while. I wanted to get sculptural with the leather, which is what I'm looking to, it inspired me to kind of go that route.
It's beautiful.
So it's just talent work, but I'm, really honored to be here to get to talk to y'all about everything we bring to tables.
Okay, so that brings me, thank you so much, Yohance. Thank you so much, Erin. That brings me to our first question, which is kind of bouncing from last week. A sister named Abir was asking a question that really kind of circulated around why design. A lot of the push with raising products was why design here? Like why are we trying to emphasize art and design within our communities and really putting a focus on all those things that come before and after it, be it research, be it business side, and be it something that working with your hands. So she asked, is design here to fulfill a purpose or to make a profit? How do we balance the line between the two? And so that question I'm posing for her. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Erin, you wanna? Or I will.
I don't. Why don't you start?
Okay. I think it's a great question, and I've been thinking about it deeply, and don't know if I've come up with a solid answer because it is such a balance. I think it's both. I think that we see right now that, you know, as artists and designers, we can get dreamy because we're creative, and we can lose sight of the fact that, you know, there were people before paper, but, you know, there's been a need to, you have to have this paper before you can perform, before, you know what I mean, in order to just live. It's just a part of life that, you know, it can be, it's kind of tragic when you really study it, which is why I don't think we do, but it's just a part of life that you have to make a profit in order, you know, in order for to give your best design. So I guess it becomes, the balance is gone too far towards profit if a designer is compromise himself, and his or her art world, network, close constituency, you know, he sold out. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think it can be either or both, you know, sort of depending on what the situation or the sort of circumstance is. I mean, a lot of design is a function of need, right? So and, you know, so it sort of like has to happen in some senses. Like it has to sort of, you know, design comes to meet a critical need, and that you know, will happen whether or not there is a profit on the end of it. So I think, yeah, that it's both, but it also can be either or.
You know, actually, you know what, so when I think of design, you're right. Because I noticed when you brought Metaliga in the lasting machine, you're like, it's engineering, not design. And I was kind of thinking, like, you know, at that point, it kind of does start to depend on what we're calling design. Because of what I do, I'm thinking of design, at least in terms of, I'm thinking of design more as art, like the beautiful piece on your walls, right? You don't need those. So, but in actuality, you're right. It's definitely, design is real anyway. So it only makes sense to profit from it. But you're right. The purpose comes first. If there's a chicken or an egg, I think the purpose has to come first.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna say that I'd agree with that as well. But I keep getting into like, I want to answer these questions with y'all.
But you're talking with us though.
Why can't you?
Well, I think like the design process, particularly in our neighborhoods, I think it almost, you can't have it without a profit. I mean, I think the number one dire need in our communities is like equity and industry. Like and that industry can be, you know, cardboard boxes. I don't know, but it needs to have something that brings funds, creates jobs, and sort of sustains us to make a living. I myself as a designer have done the two, and I have to look back over time. But yeah, a lot of projects you do for very little money, but there needs to be some profit in there. Like and a lot of the times we are working for like the material and the labor and not thinking about the years of experience that's already been gained, and then the skills of just how to make that thing is something you've worked and you need to profit from. I think it's a thing that an architect goes to school to learn how to build buildings, and there's a skill set that comes along with even thinking about that. Even when we're sketching it, we are sketching it with years of experience that's helping us sketch that. So yeah, I think if I were to answer that question,
well, I guess it's a slightly different question to me, because like if the question is, you know, should people who are designing things be paid for their talents, then the answer is yes.
Yeah.
You know.
Absolutely.
But you know, I think I guess maybe I read the question slightly differently, which is sort of like philosophical question about the purpose of design. Like, what is it?
Yeah.
What is it doing? Like, what is the function of that in our lives? And I don't know that that is always transactional. Like sometimes good design is a need that you do, to, answer a question or solve a problem or, whatever that is. But if it is a question of whether or not these skills that designers have within our communities need to be valued and compensated, then definitely that is a yes to that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I not to throw things, but I'm a community guy. Like I'm all about losing my shirt for the cause, and I know it from experience. And I think purpose. I don't think you should design if you don't have a purpose. All right, so that purpose could be for a number of reasons, but I also think that you have to make a living.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, yeah, that's where the profit part comes in.
Well, no, you gave us good detail because it's a huge question. Design, purpose, and profit. Not for profit is not for profit, but somebody walks away with a lifestyle they can lead.
Yeah.
And so, but at the same time, like Erin was saying, if we think about it existentially, and wherefore art thou? It's like, well, then, yeah, that's the purpose precedes the profit. But on the boots, like you get to talking about in our communities, that's even more detailed. And so, the profit that the profit has to be recognized as a value to everybody else too. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to figure out like where the value is coming from in the community, and spread that idea of what's worthy of making somebody profit from.
Yeah. I think there's also this way in which I think me and Fo have had the conversation around return on investment. Like really thinking about like what is the return on investment if I'm doing this in my community, for my community, what comes out of it? And if that means like, a block in my neighborhood looks a little different than it looked yesterday. There's an educational value that's now stamped into it. And people, instead of walking past it with a grim look on their face, are now smiling, or at least looking slightly interested, then the return on investment is there.
And there are ways to get that done, like because that's, you bring up a real point, in terms of public art, like what I was asking about recently when we talked, we just got so many, once again bringing it back to our communities, we got so many boarded up, shot out buildings, you know what I mean, and so many broken windows and everything. It's like we got a lot more to think about promoting, but where art has its place, like kids could be doing that. We talked about, I remember last week y'all were talking about how do you get, I think the 2-year-old involved in Pilsen. That's a great question.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. I'd like to throw out there.
8-year-old?
No, it's a second grader. How do you get a second grader in Pilsen, Inglewood, or Roseland interested in design?
Right. I mean,
or at least exposed to it.
Imagine if children saw, more of their work on blocks that in communities where the infrastructure, where the local community organizations and or governmental agencies made it a thing to make sure that the community knows our babies made this. I think it would get I think we get more respect than even from the people who show the least respect in our communities. I think it would, I'm not saying it would go graffiti free, but it would mean something. And I think that's what, art, in terms of art, I'm thinking about when I think about design. I think that's where, that value has to be recognized and acknowledged.
Sure.
Well, I think that engagement is not, sort of isolated to interactions with our young people, right? So anybody, I think that is endeavoring to work in a community needs to think about that level of engagement and interaction and participation across, you know, every generation that is present in that community. And so I think that's like where some of this work has gotten better and more sophisticated, is in our understanding that we're not just and we're working that the process of engagement and building things along with communities is as important as the thing that is as important, if not more important, than the thing that we leave behind. So it is, you know, it is about I think, and that helps, like, you know, with the sustainability of the idea, because if things just sort of like come in out of nowhere and they show up, there isn't that level of investment, right? But if we are working with communities to, you know, build these artworks, build these businesses, build these communities, then you know, then it is something that we own collectively, right? And then we are all invested in the success of this thing. So I think that's part of, you know, I think what we all sort of hope to do as like community builders is the idea that, you know, my business is your business, right?
Yeah, I think that's key. And I look at like cottage industry and probably the way our parents might have grown up. That was this automatic system. It was kind of like, I know that I run a dry cleaners. I got to train my son how to do this so that he can take over the business. Or, you know, there's this apprenticeship about like Thomas Day, this brother who used to, you know, design furniture back in the day. You know, there's this tier system, and it's automatic. And I think they're even having this issue in Italy, where we've known for so long, where this is where leather goods are made, and this is where the best shoes come from. Well, the kids in Italy are interested in technology now, so they're not interested in taking over mom and dad's business. So there's this issue of like losing cottage industry, or this bespoke skill set that we've sort of grown to know and love and respect, coming from particular cultural regions or geographically. And so I'm gonna jump into another question that kind of is in that vein. Historically, design history has shown us that American and European men lead the industry of design. Today, we need to influence a new generation that they too should be a part of this growing industry. And this new generation responds with the question, why should I be a part of this white industry?
What I think what what you started off doing, which is the sort of the busting of that myth, because that's not true. Like, you know what I mean? You know, Black folks have been developing and contributing to design and industry. We just haven't, you know, historically been credited for that, right? So I think part of that is the education that you were doing at the front of your presentation is just about, like, you know, when you say, oh, that's the real McCoy, it's because of this, right? Like that, making that education, you know, visible, I think is really important for our young people, for them to understand that this is in fact very much a part of what we do, right? So I think that's the education piece is a big part of it. But I think there's so many ways, and I think, you know, just coming back to what I was saying is that, you know, I think people are starting to think differently about the sort of tools that we provide our, you know, students in sort of classes to be, you know, sort of the power of creative and sort of critical thinking as an opportunity, as a skill to be able to solve problems, right? And I think having some opportunities to be able to integrate that into, you know, our curriculum in a real way that isn't about creativity for the sake of, you know, being an artist or even being designer, but enabling our young people to have those sort of skills. My dad was just talking the other day about how he totally doesn't understand why they don't have wood shop in school anymore. And like he was on that for like a day.
Oh, wow.
But it's because he was, you know, talking about like just sort of the practical, you know, not that everybody is going to be a woodworker, but just sort of the practical skill of being able to like work with your hands and, you know, solve a problem and, you know, fix your deck in the back, that you don't have to like call somebody to do that for you, right? So I think that there is, you know, an opportunity to, I think, really think about, you know, how we educate our children in terms of, you know, this sort of integrated creative practice is, you know, more than just sort of an isolated, you know, you make a painting and here's your thing, you know?
Yeah, like I think there's like two problems that I see in Chicago right now. And I think a lot of it is artists seeking out studios. Okay, you know, a lot of artists I know are seeking space where they can do something. And then I'm looking at, you know, the South Side and, you know, the myriad of corridors that we see that have all these vacant storefronts. And I'm just like, can those two things answer one another's questions? Like, I feel like there's problems that could easily, like, okay, so the landlord is like, nah, I don't think so. I'm gonna leave that empty. It looks better like that, boarded up, than it would look like with an artist making ceramics in there all day long. Or like, you know, so I just, I'm thinking that exposure is like the key thing. Like if we can expose them and let them know, like not just the exposure of like, here is this industry that's really happening and you can make a living, and this and then showing them that this could be your place in it. Like not that you know, you don't have to sweep the floors in this place, at least forever. You don't have to sweep the floors in this place, but you could actually, you know, help run this place, or you could be a very instrumental part of running this engine. And I think, you know, raising products is really trying to just open up options. You know, this may not be the number one way to do things, but I think it's another way to get things done. And I'm happy to hear from you too, but I want to take some questions from the audience. So audience, if you don't mind filling out any questions that you might have along the way, just put them in the little Q&A area on the bottom, and we'll get back to those questions in just a bit. In fact, I think Fo is going to ask those questions.
So both of y'all, that's real. Without that exposure, if for somebody is approaching like calling design a white industry, then they're just obviously they didn't have the exposure. Obviously, they didn't know. So that education early and that exposure to like woodshop classes, like your father's talking about, that's the stuff. I mean, you're doing woodshop, you learn stuff like who made elastic machine, where the drill comes from. You learn more and more about design. They just don't know it. They have no idea of it. And so my first thought was, you know, before you guys opened, you know, made me think bigger in terms of, you know, the fact that it's not a white industry, but even the degree that it is, to the degree that it is in the eyes of young folks, so was tennis, right? So was golf. And so I think if that is the question you're presented with by youngsters, it's like, look, okay, then you be the one to take it over. You be the one to show them you here. You know what I mean?
Sure.
You be the one to show them that, you know, it's a white industry because we haven't been here. We haven't shown up.
Right.
And then the other thing I'm thinking is just the fact that, like I sent you some pictures of MC Light in front of the Jettas, right? It's an old school paper thin video, Q-Tip, MC Light, and I want to say maybe like Kid and Play or something. They had videos together. They was all, rappers all liked each other back then, and they made the Jetta hot. They made the Jetta hot. The Jetta wasn't just like something that everybody just like, you know, Michael Jackson going to get a Jetta. The thing that people do is go get Jettas. Them, you know, New York, you know, hip hoppers, youngsters from the hood made the Jetta hot. I drove a Jetta for years because my father did, and he didn't know why he loved it. Hip hop, young black kids made are the spearheaders of design. I mean, we didn't design the whole culture. Everything that everybody's buying and wants to do, that's you. It's a white industry because they monetized it, because they like weed is a white industry now. It wasn't. You know what I'm saying?
For
So
years, right?
you know, we made the weed industry cool. I remember when you was a thug if you smoked weed. You know what I mean? Now everybody, you know, people that never smoked weed in their life passing me weed. Like, what? But I mean, which is cool. I'm just saying, to your point, we are the original designers of everything that's profiting with purpose right now in this whole culture.
Yeah, I think the bottom line for me is how do we get in front of that? Because we're branding everything. You know, we're putting a stamp on it. It's
We make
escalating.
You got to market it. That's, you know, you look at. I mean, Erin, you do this, so you I mean, this is my unprofessional, uneducated guess and thoughts, right? Just kind of more raw, that you got to market it. There's music that we listen to that we don't like, but it plays so many times, you get to knowing it. It's marketed. There, you know, people drink Coca-Cola because it's been marketed to them so hard. Everything is to get in front of and make it, you know, to sell it. We're talking about selling stuff. You got to market anything you sell, and the idea of design has to be valuable. We got to find out who's making stuff valuable in the eyes of the second grader, who we want to get into design, and who's making stuff valuable in the eyes of the kid who says, you know, it's a white industry. Who's making stuff valuable to them, and then make that valuable.
Hey, Norm, can we get some questions in with the
go for
time we have left? Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so hey, so a couple of these. Hi, everybody. So I'm looking at the question, and a couple of them are address similar things. So Stephen Fisher, kind of directed towards you, Yohance, but it asks a question about kind of addressing what you all are just talking about. He says he commends Yohance for his work that he's done. He talks about correctional industries is one of the few places in the United States that teach leather work. The Amish community and very few other schools or other places, including shoemaking school in Chicago. So while the craftsmanship is exercised and employed while a person is incarcerated at a ridiculous low wage, he says, there are few ways to offer employment as a leather worker when one returns to society. So he's asking, you know, what is making this this so difficult in terms of trying to get in the industry? Of course, you, Yohance, are doing it kind of on your own. And let's see. So maybe you can address that briefly, and we have two other questions.
Right. So there's not, technology has kind of priced out leather work as the service it used to be. You know what I mean? So, you know, people are not investing in one-of-a-kind shoes anymore to keep the shoemakers open the same way they did, because now they just get a new pair of cheap shoes. But I mean, you got upholstery, you got options, you know, but you just have to really look at where leather is. If we're talking about leather in particular, I was fortunate to work at a leather school, the Chicago School of Shoemaking. But I mean, people come from all over the country to this place, so it's not, once again, it's not like that's just a real option for a lot of people. And so, you know, I think if you're interested in leatherwork in particular, you got to look into design for self, as opposed to trying to use it as a service. And then, you know, and then opportunities for service will open up as you work for yourself and people know you do it. But I don't think you're going to sustain just providing a service that just addresses handling leather by hand.
Got you. So I think it sounds like
I appreciate them too. Thank you.
Okay. So Eric Hotchkiss asks a kind of a going back to the whole idea of it being thought of or being taught like it's a white industry. He goes back. He is saying that maybe it's not a white industry, but we don't own the means to profit from it. Like the system isn't set up for designers of color to get into the industry so easily in order to either work for a large company, or it's not necessarily easy to start your own design firm. And he says, with design being secondary to manufacturing, how do we address ownership in design without addressing the lack of ownership in the not so sexy field of manufacturing? So he's going back to manufacturing. It sounds like he's saying, okay, we can be designers, but really, perhaps he's suggesting that maybe there's some other larger opportunities in manufacturing.
I think that's definitely true. I think design is definitely one of the like fastest, in terms of like creative industry, design is definitely one of the fastest growing sort of segments of that I think we're trying to understand. And I do think that part of that understanding is not separating it from you know, the full like life cycle of that work. So the design, you know, product design and manufacturing sort of comes into that. You have to look at that as an entire picture. I have two good friends that are product designers, industrial product designers, and they are, you know, frequently working, you know, with China and, you know, whoever to, you know, manufacture these products. I think that and Norman, this is definitely part of, I think, how you and Fo are thinking about this is not only the product, but what are the opportunities within our communities to actually manufacture, right, those products, and does that then bring in another level of sort of job creation at a scale, right, in which is going to be super meaningful and impactful, right? Because a designer is, you know, a handful of designers is one thing, but a manufacturing plant is something else.
Yeah.
So I think that's spot on.
Yeah, no doubt. I don't want to take over that. Yohance, did you want to dip in there?
It goes back to everything he said. He kind of answered the question by stating the facts. We don't have that type of capital. We don't have the infrastructure. It takes, you know, space, people, and a lot of machinery, and you know, to make manufacturing locally and by us makes sense. And so, and I think that's what all of us have to be working for. We're like, to reference hip hop again, we're like hip hop in the 80s. You know what I mean? So the next step right now, we getting airplay. You know what I mean? The next step has to be trying to get a label. You know what I mean? Or press our own single up. You know what I mean? So we're still in terms of this conversation. I think that, you know, we got to all head there. We got to all head in that direction.
Yeah, perhaps Daniel Overby's question, he's asking, as Black designers, can you talk about your challenges and success in collaborating cross-culturally? And I'm wondering if, to answer the other question, Eric's question, is perhaps there's opportunities for partnerships, like not inventing the wheel, but partnering with other people that do have the resources. So perhaps you can talk about Daniel's question about the challenges and successes in collaborating cross-culturally.
So I got a really interesting situation. I work at the Chicago School of Shoemaking, owned by Sarah McIntosh, an older white woman, and she invested into my company. And we had, we went back and forth as to, was it be a partnership to independence, more of an investment in it, but after we worked it all out, I was able to advance probably, to a step faster than I would have gotten to on my own because of her investment and that collaboration. So for the, look, I don't know, for white folks who care, the friends of the Negro, whatever you call it, right? But lending that social capital is important, right? Because otherwise you're just talking. You're just having a conversation, right? So if and this is a conversation about some shit that needs a solution. So that social capital is important in a cross-cultural relationship. And and outside of that, you know, but you got to we got to be careful, right? Because to liken this to the record deal again in hip hop, you got to be careful that these collaborations, we got to learn from history and realize that collaborations cannot be a takeover.
Sure.
It happens. It's
Yeah,
happened too many
I was
times.
going to ask about that next. Like, what are the cons that come along with, like, okay, you've gotten a deal going, your record is cut. Now the person you're collaborating with tells you the percentage exchange between the two of you. How's that been with that sort of deal? Like, how does that work out for you?
Well, for me, you know, I'm working. The people I'm working with, you know, they are they're fair people, right? And at the same time, you know, I learned enough from the literal record game and watching what, you know, what we've endured in a lot of industries. I just keep referencing that because it feels so close to me. But and so I was able to negotiate for terms that, you know, I'm cool with. You know, it was an investment. It was, and realize at the end of the day, it was the same thing as an investment with different terms, obviously, as if you get a loan, right? And
Sure.
you know, and it's just you get a return on your investment, right? So
Right.
at that point, and that's where, great question, because business, you know, once you're talking about collaboration, you're talking about business. We're talking about profit. So once you're talking about collaboration, you know, we just like we don't have this stuff in our neighborhoods, a lot of us don't have the wherewithal to handle these business relationships. So we got to get our business tight too. But for me, it's worked well.
Erin,
I
did
think
you
we
want?
should be also just like mindful of all of the different types of businesses that there are, right? Like we tend to think about, you know, are there, you know, other models of cooperation and collaboration that we can explore as communities, that where we can sort of through a structured system, you know, share resources, right? So I think we just need to sort of be open to thinking about all of the different ways in which, you know, business can be created in our communities that will, you know, might rely more heavily on these sort of collaborative partnership models.
Sure. I think you're right. I see Tanner pop back in.
I'm here to stop the fun. So sorry. What a great conversation. Thanks so much, and Yohance and Erin and Fo for your words as well. There are links in the program that we put in the Q&A to support Chicago's artists and designers, so make sure you check those out. If you'd like to support the Design Museum of Chicago, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/designmuseumshy. And don't forget to join us next week. We have one more conversation in this series. Really excited about it. I'll be with Paula and Obi. So I'll give you back the mic, Norm. I just wanted to come in and ruin the fun for a sec.
That's quite all right. Thank you so much. I just want to come in and say thank you guys so much for your time, what you do in this city, for this city. It's really impressive to me, and I'm glad to know you. So I hope that we can continue this maybe offline. I think, yeah, feel free to email me, and there's contact right there. Thank you guys.
I know how to find you.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, I'd love to continue this one, man. I'm kind of popped up. You popped up too soon. The time went too fast. We got to fix the clocks or something.
I got a backyard right here and a half a bottle of wine left. So.
Oh, baby.
Yay. Good night.
Thank you to everybody that joined us. Come back next week.
Audience, thank you so much. We look forward to hearing from you next week.